All right, so sometimes you have an approval process where you have something like this. The first step only gets done if billing country equals Canada. Otherwise, you want to skip over it. The second step is only going to be done if industry is not equal to agriculture. In other words, agriculture gets a special pass. All the other industries have to go through this step two approval. And then there's a third additional step. Now, suppose that you want, if industry is equal to agriculture, you want to automatically approve. The UI would have you think that you can do this. In fact, we've got it right here. By default, it's basically saying else approve record. And yet, it turns out there's a bug, it doesn't work, and that's why you don't see else approve record right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to work around this problem by using Flow's ability to automatically approve an approval request. And let's look at the modified version of this approval process. It's going to let us do that. Okay, so this is our modified approval process. We've added this special auto approve step. It's set to be the opposite of the one that was giving us trouble. And we have it assigned to a user called auto approver user. And so what we want to have happen here is, well, if the billing country is Canada, we got to do this step one special approval for Canada accounts. Else go on to the next step. If industry equals agriculture, we want to just auto approve it. We're going to basically assign it to the auto approver user who will auto approve it. If it's not agriculture, we'll move on to what's now actually the third step. All right, so let's see that in action. Let's go here and create account 22 and set the industry equal to agriculture. And now let's submit this for approval. And we can see down here that it went immediately to that auto approver step. However, if everything is working properly, then a second or two later, this actually got auto approved. So let's refresh it and see if that happened. And it did. And so we were able to get this auto approver user to approve this step. And if we go here and create an account that's not in industry, not in agriculture, account 23, we'll put this in consulting, submit that for approval. Here you can see that it routes on, it bypassed the special step and went to our step two, which it's kind of confusing the way I named them, but our step two is now our step three. So this is working. It is successfully auto approved. All right, so who is this mysterious and powerful auto approver user that is able to approve approval requests? This is a plain user that I created. So I just took a regular user and I called it auto approver user. You could call it anything you wanted. The only thing special about it is that its email address is not a normal email address. Its email address points to the Salesforce. It's an email address generated by Salesforce's inbound email handling service. So at this point, let's look at a diagram of how things are going to flow, because there's several different transitions involved. So when we get to this auto approver step, the approval process sends a normal email approval request to the auto approver user's email address. However, that email address is actually a special email address that Salesforce provides to enable Salesforce code to handle email automatically. So you're going to see we've set up an email service. What this email service does is it grabs that email notification about the approval request. It passes it off to an Apex class called email to flow. Now you're going to be able to install this via a package, so you don't have to be a developer to make this solution work. So the email service grabs that approval request, passes it to this email to flow class. It in turn launches a flow, and it passes the body of that email approval request to that flow. It's launching that flow. In our example, you're going to see the flow is called auto approve request. It's passing it that. And that flow ultimately is going to be it's going to tell Salesforce to approve the approval request, having first extracted the ID of the approval request from the original email notification. When we talk about an email notification, this is what we're talking about. Standard email, and you can see that buried in the link is an ID, a record ID. And that is what our flow is going to need to instruct Salesforce to approve this step. So let's go back to our auto approver user. I said that this was an auto-generated email address. Where does that happen? Look in Setup Custom Code Email Services. This is normally the domain of developers who want to write some Apex code to create processors for incoming email that they're getting from their own customers. But we're going to enable a package that you can install, and that package basically provides you with what you need to create an email service of your own. So I've created this service, and down here is where I generated the email address. So this is the email address that I assigned to the auto approver user. And that means that anytime anyone ever tries and sends email to this email address, then it's going to come to Salesforce, and Salesforce is going to look and say, I need to pass that to email to flow. And so this is an Apex class, and this Apex class is going to, in turn, call a flow that it's hard-coded to call. And so what is that flow? Well, let's go take a look at that flow. So this is the flow that's carrying out the activity. So it's going to receive that approval request email body. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to run an action called find text to extract out that record ID from all that other text. And then it's going to post some of its intermediate values to Chatter. This is really just a debugging step, completely unnecessary, but it can be useful. The real activity happens down here. This is a new action called resolve approval request, and we are telling it to do an approve, and we are passing it the ID that we extracted out of that email that was passed to us by the Apex class that got it from the email service, that got it from the email that was originally sent by the approval processes system when the step started that was assigned to the auto approver user. Let's go over the steps involved in adding an auto approver capability. The first step is to install the extension that lets the Salesforce email service pass incoming emails to a flow. And that is a package that's documented and explained and is available right here on Unofficial SF. So that's going to be step one. Step two is to install the find text extension. That's a simple little action that simply lets you pull the desired record ID out of a block of text. The third thing you're going to have to do is to generate the resolve approval process action. That's where the magic happens. That's this key action here that actually can take a record ID of an approval request and an instruction, approve, reject, or remove, and carry it out. Now, why are we not why do we say generate here? We can't provide a package and just make this click installable, unfortunately, because of some packaging limitations that involve approval processes. So you have to do a few extra steps, and those are talked about right here. Basically, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take the actual apex of the resolve approval request invocable action. You have to take this all and you're going to have to add it to your org. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either go to Developer Console and say New Apex Class, or you can go over here to Apex Classes and Setup. Then the next step after that is to create the little flow that's going to use the stuff you just installed and generated. So you really only need two actions. You need that find text to extract it, and then you need the action that you just, the auto approver, the resolver that you just generated. There's one other little part that's important. You have to create an input variable called email underscore text body. It's got to be exactly like this. This is what that email to flow service passes to the flow that it is told to use. And make sure that you activate your flow. The final step is that once you've created this flow, you don't have to call it auto approve request. So this is my flow API name. You can call yours anything you want, but there is an important little final step, which is that we have to go into email to flow. That's our email service. And here's the email to flow class. You have to go into this and you have to make sure that this code has the appropriate name of the flow you're calling. Because when you install it from the package, it isn't going to have this. It's not going to say auto approve request. I think when you install it from this package, it is called email controller, and it points to a sample flow that's provided. So after you create your final flow, go to this line 79 and change it. Put the name of it here and here. This is the crucial line where the Apex code that has received the incoming email calls a flow and says, hey, flow, go run this thing, and passes all of the different inputs in.